Yo, what's going on, guys? Crispy Flakes here. Welcome to Extra Crispy. For today's video, man, we got the worst draft mistake from every NBA team. Video by Austin Swelek here, guys. Link to his channel in the description below. Straight up, man, I know the Pistons, we got a damn baker's dozen of damn draft mistakes just based off the past 6 years, guys. So, yeah, trust me, I know all about my team. You guys remind me every single day. It's time to see what every NBA team's worst mistake is so we can roast them. Or maybe I'll just feel even worse about the Pistons and what's all said and done. So let's get it, man.
The worst draft mistake from every NBA team over the past 20 years.
The beast.
As you'll see, some teams haven't made many mistakes at all, but others would be instant championship teams had they played their cards right.
Detroit.
And we'll get to that. For this video,
no
though,
doubt.
A couple of things. For example, because a guy like, say, Steph Curry didn't get drafted until 7th, we're not calling it a mistake for all 6 teams that picked before.
I agree with that.
Just for the teams up until that point that may...
See, that's what pisses me off the most, man. It's when somebody's like, yeah, Crispy, the Pistons drafted KCP, but, 19,000 picks later, they could have had LeBron James. It's like, what? It's bro, every damn other team out there all missed out.
They have needed a point guard. And the other thing is that the farther back players fall, the less we're going to consider the mistakes. Because late draft picks are often surprises to everyone. We'll still mention some later picks.
Bro, don't ever shoot a three-pointer again, man. Bro, why are you shot putting the ball, bro? That's not track and field, man. I don't really think that's how you throw one. Actually, I think you throw, I don't know, man. I threw it at somebody once in high school and I got kicked off the team. So I actually didn't make the team because of that. But yeah, okay.
But not many.
How you shot put?
In the 2011 NBA draft, the Phoenix Suns made the choice to draft Markieff Morris at 13 instead of Kawhi Leonard, who wasn't taken until 15.
Man.
And this is tough to look
back on, but
makes a lot of sense knowing the Suns. I mean, they needed both the small and power forward positions filled, which was why Markieff split minutes between the two when he...
Let's be honest, they get Marcus also, right? But still, they drafted Markieff first, and Marcus was the better, so they still screwed up on that aspect too.
Got drafted there. So they could have just as easily taken Leonard, because going into the draft their two small forwards were Jared Dudley and Grant Hill, who was in his second to last season already.
Yeah, it'd been about 97 at that point.
Since they took Marcus Morris with the 14th pick, but since the Suns picked first, we're giving them this mistake.
Oh, Marcus went to the Rockets? What?
The Lakers honestly didn't have many drafting mistakes, and that's why they've consistently been good. But the one they did have was selecting Lonzo Ball second overall instead of De'Aaron Fox, who was still available until he was picked 5th by the
it's
Kings.
fine.
It was a move Magic Johnson wanted to make, but the final decision came down to ownership, and they made the wrong one.
But let's be 100% honest though. The Lakers, since they have been good for so long, they were never really in the position to draft bad because they didn't have really a lot of top picks. Because, they would always sign the superstar free agents or big-time trades, Pau Gasol for Kwame Brown and stuff. So they weren't really in the circumstance to even make bad draft choices.
Now, you may say this really doesn't matter because they traded him for Anthony Davis anyways. But hey, maybe if the trade would have involved De'Aaron instead of Lonzo, they would have gotten to keep some of the other assets that they traded away instead. If you go way back to 2002, you'll remember that Amari Stoudemire was drafted 9th overall straight out of high school. And looking back, it makes you question what the Nuggets were thinking taking Nicolos.
That guy was supposed to be a beast,
Amari
I heard.
A 6-time All-Star. Nicolos averaged 2 points a game.
That guy was supposed to be a beast, man. He didn't do shit, though.
The Nuggets were terrible at the time, so they definitely could have used Amari. But it also could have meant that they never ended up getting Carmelo Anthony in the next year's draft. So I guess it's okay. Dante Exum's without a doubt one of the biggest draft busts in recent memory.
Sadly.
Since he's done nothing in the NBA. And that's bad, but it's even worse knowing that the Jazz could have taken Zach LaVine, who wasn't drafted until the 13th spot later that night.
Whatever.
They would have teamed him up with Gordon Hayward, Derek Favors, and Rudy Gobert.
LaVine took a bit, though, and then they ended up getting Donovan Mitchell anyway, so it's not that, I don't really think that one's that big a deal. LaVine was a few years before he became the player he's on the Bulls now, so yeah, it worked out fine.
Will always carry one of the most historically bad draft mistakes of the 2000s. As a matter of fact, before and after the 2000s, since they passed on Michael Jordan in '84 too. In that case, though, they did have Clyde Drexler already. But in this case, they needed both a small forward and a center equally as bad. Martell Webster was their forward, and Joe Prisbilla was their center. They had a 50-50 shot, but turned down the most skilled player in the NBA draft, by far, for the guy that wasn't as talented, but could lift more weights. And we all know how that went. And 2 years before that, in 2005, they drafted Martell Webster after trading down from the number 2 spot to the number 6
not a
spot
mistake
in
if the player's
draft,
injured,
willingly giving up
in
on
my
the
opinion.
opportunity to draft both Darren Williams and Chris Paul at the time when Damon Stoudemire was their starting point guard.
Oh, Damon was
they really
nice.
could have had CP3, Kevin Durant, LaMarcus Aldridge, and Brandon Roy all on the same team. So, Blazers fans, I'm sorry to put you through that, but Kings fans, you're gonna need to take a seat for this one. We'll start though in 2009
I can't even smile
because that year they needed a shooting guard.
team's right
They took Tyreek Evans 4th overall instead of DeMar DeRozan, who ended up going 9th. 2 years later,
I
the
like Tyreek.
2011
He was
draft,
nice.
they take Jimmer Fredette 10th as a point/shooting guard. Then Klay Thompson gets drafted with the very next pick. The next year, okay, they really
Don't roast Nick Stauskas, please.
needed a power forward, but could have used a point guard too because Jimmer was a bust and Isaiah Thomas was a rookie, only averaging 11 points a game. But they picked Thomas Robinson
Okay,
5th
Nick
overall
Stauskas, okay.
when Damian
Cool.
Lillard ended up getting taken with the very next pick. So we're talking only a 3-year span right here, and they missed out on Dame, Clay, and DeRozan. But having not picked either future All-Star shooting guard, now they needed one. So they draft Ben McLemore with
Hey,
the
so no
7th
roast
pick
Nick
and let
Stauskas.
CJ McCollum drop down to the 10th. Then finally, the one that still hurts Kings fans more than anything, and if any Kings fan is somehow still watching this without having collapsed, this is the one that's going to do it because as we know, they drafted Marvin Bagley over Luka Doncic in 2018. And one of the biggest mistakes of all time. And this
Hey,
is what
Marvin
I
could
mean.
still be a
They could
problem.
a potential championship contender if they just made a few more smart decisions. But they didn't. The Grizzlies are in a good spot in recent years, but they've had some mistakes of their own too. Like in the 2009 draft when they selected Hasheem Thabeet 2nd overall
Yeah, what a
over
bust.
James Harden. They did just draft OJ Mayo the year before, so it would make sense why
Hey,
they
Thabeet
did
was
draft
supposed to be
shooting
a damn
guard, but
legend,
They also
but he
just drafted
sucks.
Marc Gasol the previous year, so not really. They had a 50-50 chance. Bet on OJ and draft Hasheem, or bet on Gasol and draft Harden.
Okay, so well, let's just. So if you think about it, replace Hasheem because Marc Gasol became the superstar player. So it's like they got Marc Gasol over James Harden, which is still, not great, but it makes it sound better.
And obviously they made the wrong choice. And they did the same thing a year prior when they drafted OJ, because he was drafted by them one spot ahead of Russell Westbrook. Sure, OJ would have been hard to turn down back
Didn't they
then,
trade Kevin
but
Love
looking
also?
back, it was a bad decision.
Drafted by the Grizzlies, and they traded him to the Timberwolves.
Minnesota definitely holds one of the most infamous draft day mistakes, really ever, because in 2009 they desperately needed a point guard.
Drafted 9
having
point
only
guards.
Sebastian Telfair at the time, and they proceeded to pass on Steph Curry 2 times in a row and picked both Ricky Rubio and Johnny Flynn over Steph. I mean, come on, they had a 2 out of 3 chance and they blew it. Fast forward 1 year later and things get worse, because now they needed a small forward, so they pick Wesley Johnson, which was a bad move already. The man never averaged double digits. But then Paul George,
Double-digit
also a small
crossovers.
forward, goes 10th overall. And I'd say the Wolves just can't catch a break, but
And
it's
Gordon.
their fault. The Atlanta Hawks' biggest mistake that they made is still costing them to this day. And you
What's
look back
that?
at the 2004 and 5 season and see that they really could have used help at every position, which is why they finished that year with a 13-69
And
record.
they had Josh Smith.
And so they had the second
Thought he
pick
was a
in the
scrub
next
on the Pistons.
draft. They could have drafted Darren Williams or Chris Paul, but instead they chose Marvin Williams.
Hey, Marvin was
The
fine.
Pacers' biggest mistake by
fine.
far has always
It's all
been
good.
selecting Kawhi Leonard in 2011,
Played a long time.
getting so close to having him on their team, but then trading him away that same night for George Hill. I don't need to say anything else. For as good as Milwaukee
neither
is
do I.
these days, you might not think they've made too many draft mistakes recently over recent years, but they've had a couple big ones, like when they needed a big man in 2007 and
Yo,
winning
Yi
Yi
Jianlian!
over Joakim Noah.
Yes, man. Okay, so at my old job, before I started doing YouTube full time, I had to. So I worked in like a purchasing, which is like the opposite of sales or whatever. And there was this guy from headquarters in Suzhou, which is not in the United States. And we had nothing in common. He also didn't speak English. But then I mentioned basketball, and he was like, Yi Jianlian. And I was like, yes, Yi Jianlian, man. That's what we talked about for 5 seconds out of our 1 hour, employee dinner.
Noah was a defensive player of the year. Janelin played
Also, Loki, he wanted me to drive him back to his hotel, but then he said he wanted to go to the mall, and he said he would just walk home, and I knew it was like a 5-mile walk, but he really wanted to go to the mall, so I dropped at the mall, and I don't know how we got home. Guys. He made it to work the next day, though.
played 5 seasons in the league. And aside from drafting a few players,
I also think he thought that there was fruits and vegetables at the mall. And I could have told him, but I wasn't really sure. Okay, I'm just letting all the damn skeletons out, guys. This is about 5-6 years ago now.
Higher up that turned out to be nobodies. They also drafted Jabari Parker over Joel Embiid.
Were we watching? Oh yeah, draft.
And at
bus.
the time, Wiggins and Parker were the clear choices to go 1 and 2 that year, with everyone saying Embiid was gonna go 3rd, because teams were worried about his injuries. But now it's turned out to be the opposite, with Jabari being the one that's injury prone, meaning they should have.
Damn, Tatum can now hold Joel.
And if things went right, that would have given them Giannis and Joel on the same team.
BFFs.
The Knicks are basically built on bad decisions, so surprisingly there was only 2 big draft day mistakes in recent memory. The first was picking Frank Ntilikina 8th overall in 2017 when Donovan Mitchell was still available until the...
Or Luke Kennard. Like, why do we gotta skip down Donovan Mitchell? You already passed another great shooting guard, man. Like, you already passed, a 16, 5-5, future 25, 5-5 type of player right there, man. Okay, it's fine.
And yes, they play different positions, but come on. The Knicks needed new players at every position at that point. Their other big mistake came in 2005 when they also had the 8th overall pick, and they used it to draft big man Channing Frye. But just 2 picks later, Andrew Bynum was drafted by the Lakers. Sure, his career was pretty much over by the time he turned 25, but he helped LA to 2 championships while Frye played in New York for 2 seasons. Not a huge one for the Nets, but it was worth mentioning that in 2010, they did take Derek Favors 3rd overall over DeMarcus Cousins.
Okay.
Cousins was one of the top 2
in the
league for a while there, and Favors was never more than average.
They already had Lopez.
This one for the Bulls hurt because
right?
in 2006, they did draft LaMarcus Aldridge, but then traded him down
right
away for Tyrese.
Love Tyrese.
Terrible call, and I mean, that one hurts.
I love Tyrese Thomas.
As Philly fans remember, the 76ers had a lot of years of top picks in the draft from the process. But what they may try to forget is just how many of those turned out to be busts. Because they drafted Evan Turner 2nd overall in 2010, also over DeMarcus Cousins.
And they
drafted Markelle Fultz over Lonzo Ball, which sure at the time seemed good, but since has turned out to be a disaster. And let's not forget they drafted Jahlil Okafor 3rd overall when Kristaps Porzingis went to the Knicks with the very next pick. And they were that close to having a Porzingis Embiid.
But the draft is like, that's the thing about busts. It's like, it's so hard to nail it. So the fact that the 76ers even have Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, I mean, yeah, they got some busts, but they got some pretty damn good players too.
Front court. But
Matisse Thybulle too. Then they drafted him. Was he part of a draft night trade?
So many top picks for like a 4 or 5 year stretch, and they only ended up with 2 top players. Still good, but should have been more.
Oh, I think they did phenomenal.
And again, the Magic too. Orlando's made of terrible decisions. Bad trades, bad signings, and everything. But only one major draft mistake I could find, which was that they took Mario Hezonja 5th overall over Devin Booker. Sure, Booker surprised a lot of people coming into the league.
That was a bit of a fall down right there, though.
Back,
a lot of teams made that mistake.
Then these next 2 for the Raptors are hard to look at because Chris Bosh needed the help and the team could have been much better. First, in the 2004 season, they had 6 different centers on their roster that year.
Wow, what is that lineup? They drafted
Rafael Arroyo 8th when they could have had Andre
2K20 generated players, man.
Bosh. Then 2 years later in 2006, they draft another big man to try and pair with Bosh. But this time it's Andrea Bargnani who went 1st overall. And that right there was terrible enough. But the fact that LaMarcus Aldridge went 2nd and they could have had him makes it that much worse.
Bargnani wasn't that bad though.
The Celtics were also looking for a big man in the 2012 draft. So
not
they
that good.
Both Jared Sullinger and Fab
Melo.
Fab Melo played 6 total games for them. And
Syracuse,
Jared
right?
Sullinger turned out to be a dud. And that hurts because they had 2 chances to draft Draymond Green and chose not to, which is a pretty rare mistake coming from the Boston Celtics. Also in the market for a power forward, the Heat in 2008 could have had Kevin Love. They had the 2nd overall pick and Love wasn't drafted until 5th. But instead they ended up with Michael Beasley.
Beasley was just lazy. He could have been as good as any of those other players. He just lazy.
Honestly, it was an honest mistake at the time, but still one that they missed out on.
He was just lazy.
That one wasn't as intense as in 2001 when the Wizards made the mistake of all mistakes and picked Kwame Brown with the 1st overall pick when they could have just went with Pau Gasol or Tyson Chandler instead. And this will always go down as one of the biggest draft mistakes of all time.
But it's not like they missed out on that much. Like, yes, Pau Gasol and Tyson Chandler, both great NBA players in their own regard, but it could have been worse. They could have drafted Kwame over, like, insert superstar, I guess. LeBron James. Okay. That's my go-to
The
superstar,
Hornets
I guess.
then made one of their own by selecting Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, one spot ahead of Bradley Beal. We've seen Gilchrist peak as a player.
Did they
a
not
long
test
time
his jump
ago.
shot in
We
the
know that he's
camps?
a solid two-way player, but nothing
Combine?
more. While on the other hand, we're still seeing Beal get better every single season and average over 30 points a game. Who hold another one of the spots for the biggest draft day
Bro, why is he
mistakes
punching
ever.
him?
I get that
Not part of
back then,
basketball.
the 2013 draft looked like a weak one. It's turned out to be a pretty strong one since then, but back then it was weak. But nobody made them go and pick Anthony Bennett over Victor Oladipo. And Bennett is still the biggest draft bust of all time. And that may be true, but it's not the worst mistake because Darko Milicic over Melo, Bosh, and Wade will forever be the biggest draft day mistake ever. And still doesn't make any sense to this day. Oh, and also don't forget the Pistons chose to take Brandon Knight over Kemba.
Okay, we're doing one! It was one for each team!
Walker 1 year. I should also not forget to mention that the Mavs, Warriors, Clippers, Rockets, and Thunder didn't have any major mistakes that I could find. So if you're a
Bro, Darko was looked upon as a generational talent. Anybody could have made that damn mistake. Like, seriously, man, look at the scouting reports for Darko before he was drafted, guys. Like, straight up, man, they were talking about, like, Hakeem. It's not fair, man. We still got a damn championship, too, so it's fine. It's fine.